So I made the decision to sell my belongings and quit my job to travel the world. I without a plan. I had no plan at all. And I traveled 17 countries over 2 years. And I ended up living in Bali for 15 months over the pandemic. The borders closed, and I had the choice to stay or go. So I stayed.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Ronin Mindset Podcast. My name is Steve Didier, and in this podcast, we have conversations with modern day Ronins, the digital nomads, the global citizens and entrepreneurs who have extracted themselves from the matrix and are thriving while traveling the world. And today we have a very special guest. I would like to bring on Miss Jessica Seiders. Jessica has a really interesting story. She embarked on a transformative journey after her daughter left for college. Confronted with the challenges of empty nest syndrome, she refused to let it define her. Taking bold action, Jessica sold her belongings, quit her job, and set off on a 2-year adventure to explore the world. During her travels, Jessica became a master certified life coach. Her experiences and encounters inspired her to launch a program called Strong Mom to Fearless Female. This initiative aimed to empower and support mothers who, like her, were navigating the transition to an empty nest. Through workshops, coaching, and shared stories, Jessica helped these women embrace their newfound independence and discover their inner strength. Now residing in sunny San Diego, Jessica's passion for fostering community led her to create a Facebook group called San Diego Moms of Adult Children. The group has grown to 1,300 members, all united by their shared journey through their grown children. Together, they have organized over 40 successful events, fostering connections and providing a support network for mothers in similar circumstances. Jessica has recently launched a business called Up Fem and continues to uplift and empower women, proving that life is what you make of it. She will be traveling full-time once again while creating group trips for empty nester moms. Welcome to the show, Jessica. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. And, I know you've got a real interesting story, so let's just jump into it. Can you tell me a little bit about your past and what brought you to where you're at now?
Sure. So after my daughter left for college, I was feeling really, really sad, lonely, depressed. I lost my identity as a mom, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't like my job. I had been with the company at that point for 13 years. I just felt um like I needed a change, and I went 4 months feeling very lost without my daughter, and then I just asked myself, do I want her to be worried about me, or do I want her to be proud of me? So I made the decision to sell my belongings and quit my job to travel the world. I without a plan. I had no plan at all, and I traveled 17 countries over 2 years. And I ended up living in Bali for 15 months over the pandemic. The borders closed, and I had the choice to stay or go. So I stayed, and then I came back to the United States, and I made my way to San Diego, where I started the group for moms of adult children, and I found my passion. So I think this journey really helped me to, number one, in Europe, I found myself outside of being a mom. I did all sorts of fun things that I never would have done as a mother. Then in Bali, I went on a healing journey, and in San Diego, I found my passion for helping empty nester moms, and now I'm ready to just continue inspiring other people, and I'm heading to Mexico and then Guatemala.
Oh, that's amazing because you're leaving here very soon, right? October 1st?
October 1st, yes.
Or you're leaving where you're at here, but yeah.
Mhm.
So that's very cool. If you have to be stranded somewhere during the pandemic, I probably couldn't think of a better place than Bali.
Yeah, it was perfect because they closed the borders and all the tourists went home. So I got to experience Bali in a way that nobody really ever has.
That's amazing. That would be so much fun. Because I know when we talked a little bit before the podcast, you said that you were kind of watching the US from outside and seeing all the discord and everything, all the crazy stuff going on, whereas in Bali it was a different vibe.
It really was. We just kind of lived our lives normally. And so watching the pandemic from the outside was just very interesting. It was like in Bali, they were very community oriented and they helped each other and they were very much family oriented. And I know that the United States, everybody loves their family, but it was more of like a everybody for themselves kind of vibe, pulling guns over toilet paper and all that. I think that it was just a very different, I think every country dealt with the pandemic in a different way. And in Bali, it was very different.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I was pretty lucky because I had ended up back. I had left Mexico and I went to Phoenix for a short time. So I ended up being in Phoenix when the pandemic hit. So I hadn't planned to be there that long. I ended up staying a little bit longer than anticipated. But yeah, it was a different vibe. And you have the different pockets, that were kind of community oriented. But overall, it was a lot of division, a lot of crazy stuff. But yeah, Bali sounds like a much better alternative because as soon as I could get out again, I was back on the road.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely changes your mindset, like traveling the world, seeing the way that other cultures do things, and then you're able to like compare rather than just seeing one way of life.
Exactly. Now, with you traveling, that's a lot of different stuff going on there because, obviously you have grown children, you're a little bit older, you're not a 18-year-old backpacker,
Hmm.
and you're also traveling solo as a woman.
Hmm.
So what was there, did you encounter anything with that? Because I know there are a lot of people that listen that maybe wanting to get on the road or wanting to travel, maybe they're a little hesitant, especially if they're females or older people as well. They're kind of in that groove and kind of, I don't want to say scared necessarily, but yeah, scared to take that leap of faith.
I think it's normal to have fears, and a lot of people do. I just kind of went with the flow. I never felt scared at any point in my trip. I never came across any kind of dangerous situation. And I think that no matter where you're living, whether you're in the United States or out, there are chances that you can run into a dangerous situation, but I didn't ever feel scared.
And you went to some countries like Mexico you did go to Mexico in that first trip or no?
Not in the first trip. That Mexico was my most recent trip.
Okay. Okay. And Mexico has this reputation for being extremely dangerous. And like I try and counter that as best I can because I've spent a great deal of time in Mexico. Playa del Carmen was my home base for quite a while. And I'm currently in Monterrey, Mexico right now. I think you can find danger anywhere, but you traveling as a single female, solo, you didn't really find any place that you felt really uncomfortable or dangerous, correct?
I think that there's dangerous places everywhere, like anywhere. If you go to, say, San Francisco, it's going to be different than San Diego. Like there's just different places that you can go that are dangerous and places that aren't dangerous. So you just have to do your research and make sure that you don't go to a place that is known to be dangerous. And I did
Yeah.
learn a lesson to stick to tourist destinations because in the tourist destinations they speak English more frequently.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, like I wouldn't plan a trip and go vacation and poke around the south side of Chicago,
Right. Yeah.
it's use common sense for the most part. And that's why I tell people when they're visiting Mexico, you can find danger anywhere, but if you are not doing drugs, selling drugs, running drugs, or buying drugs, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Stay in the reasonable areas. I like to go kind of offbeat, but I'm a different situation. I'm a somewhat adventurous man, pretty good size, so it's a little less dangerous, but that's the adventure side of me. I
Mhm.
like getting off the beaten path a little bit. But
I
what
think
is
I
what
learned
is
a lesson in Spain for myself just because I don't speak anything other than English. And so I would love to go off the beaten path, but I wasn't able to communicate with anyone for like 3 days. And I was like, okay, I think that for myself as a solo female, I think I will just stick to the tourist destinations. Mhm.
Yeah, and it's easier. That's a great thing about English too, is just about no matter where you go, if you're in a tourist destination or you're in areas where people are more educated, most people have at least a slight grasp of English, enough to get
Yeah.
by.
Yeah.
And airport signs are always in the local language in English, so it makes it very easy for those who are native English speakers.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is one, I know you've been a bunch of different places, you had some stuff during the pandemic, but what's like one really memorable encounter that you've had with like locals when you were in the area? Yeah.
I think like a memorable experience that I had with locals is that while I was in Bali, they do like a lot of ceremonies in Bali. They're very religious, they're very spiritual, and so they had a ceremony and they I was invited. So I went to the ceremony and they treated me very well and they wanted me to have the best seat and all this. So I they placed me right in front and they did their ceremony. They're doing the sage, spraying their water, things like that. And they brought out a chicken and they proceeded to cut the head off of this chicken in front of my face, like literally like 4 feet away from me. And I just stopped eating chicken for like three months. So I think that was pretty memorable. It was,
Yeah.
a part of their ritual, and they bury the chicken. They don't, that particular chicken, they don't cook it or anything like that. But it was, it was definitely something that I didn't expect, and it was memorable.
Yeah. That's when you realize you're really not in Kansas anymore, Toto.
Exactly. Mhm.
Well, let's back up a little bit because one of the subjects I find most fascinating with people who have taken that step and started traveling full time is the psychology behind it, especially if people are a little bit older. It's a little easier when you're younger, you don't have as many roots or preformed conceptions. But for people who are a little bit older and considering is there's a lot of things going on in their head. And what was the turning point for you that kind of made you want to unplug from the matrix and live a different lifestyle?
I think that for me, it was being stuck in corporate for such a long time and doing something that was not my passion. It wasn't what I enjoyed doing every single day. And I felt like it was sucking the soul out of my body. And I didn't know anything else. It was all, I did what I had to do to raise my daughter and to provide for her. But when she left, it was my opportunity to look at life a little differently. And I think as far as the first time that I decided to do this was because I was so lost that I needed to find my identity as a mom and I needed to heal from a lot of things that happened in my past and find my passion in life. I didn't know what those things were because I was a teenage parent and I kind of just jumped right into motherhood. So motherhood was my identity. And then when she left, I was just like completely beside myself. I was so lost without her. So that the first time I made the decision, it was because of that. The second time, the me leaving on October 1st was because within the last 4 years, I lost 4 people that were very close to me. And it just made me look at life differently. Like, you don't know when your time is going to be. You don't know when that's going to be. And so I want to do something that's going to make a difference in this world. And I found my passion. I want to help empty nester moms and I want to create a community, travel community, so people can travel together and just make friendships and find themselves outside of being a mom. Do things that they normally wouldn't do when they're with their kids. I just can't wait to create this community.
That's amazing. I think that's really much needed, to be
Yeah.
honest, because I've seen that. I don't have any kids myself, but I'm of that age where a lot of my friends, their kids are leaving.
Hmm.
And especially when you have children young, like you did, that becomes your identity. So when they're gone, you're like, who the
Yeah.
hell
What
am
am I
I?
then?
Right? Like,
For empty nester moms, we're all dealing with the same stuff in life. They like a lot of people are doing perimenopause, a lot of people are getting divorced, their kids are leaving home, we're taking care of our parents who may be aging. We're dealing with the death of grandparents and parents and family members, and it's just we understand each other. Like when we get into this group of people and we're talking, it's like we get it. Finally, like I feel like I found my people.
yeah, you've got your tribe now.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great.
That's amazing. Okay, so um, it's really good in life when you can find your passion and connect with your passion and develop that sense of purpose, especially when you've had this whole identity as a mom. Now, how did traveling help you reconnect with yourself and kind of escape that identity of just being a mother and find out who you truly were? How did the travel kind of assist with that?
I think as a mother, I always had a plan. You go to work, you have to take your kids to practices and whatever it is that they have going on. And once I started traveling, I had to think about what I wanted, like what I want to do. So I didn't have a plan. I got on a plane to Spain with 3 days booked in a hostel and no other plan. And so I wanted the universe to guide the way. I met people. I stayed in hostels. I did couch surfing. I did all sorts of stuff, and I jumped off of cliffs. Like I did so many things that I wouldn't do as a mom, and I found myself. Like I found who I was outside of that role of being a mom. Like, because when you're a mom, you're focused on your kids. But when you are traveling as a solo female, you're focused on yourself and what you want. So it was just an interesting switch. Like I was able to just meet new people from all over the world, which I had never done before. Staying in hostels, going to different countries. Um, yeah, it was just a different experience than I had ever had.
Yeah. I kind of had a similar sort of thing because I had built a really good real estate business over about 12 years and got married. And so I was, the husband in the real estate business. And then in the crash of '08, I lost everything.
Mhm.
And with guys in particular, we tend to forge our identity around our career, our accomplishments, as our success, our stuff. That's just very man thing to do. And when that was stripped away, I was felt it was kind of the same thing. Like, who the hell am I? Like, I gotta refigure out me. And it did everything that you described. You just do all these things. You meet people. You get a different perspective on life. If you've grown up in the United States and that's where you spent your time, you've got a very kind of myopic view of the world, and getting out really expands your mind a lot and you take in a lot of that,
Mhm.
I feel, you know. And one of the I remember so distinctly, like I just remember I'm getting goosebumps, but I remember that feeling when I was selling everything, giving it away, donating it, selling my house, selling everything I owned, and I got down. I had a dog at the time, and we drove down through Mexico on a big road trip. But that was the most amazing feeling. A lot of mixed emotions.
Mhm.
It's weird how we have this absolute attachment to material things. I'm like, oh, I don't want to give this up. I'm like, you have to. But that feeling is something that I get every single time I'm getting ready to go and downsizing, because I've done it several times in my life now, where I've just got rid of everything down to a suitcase and go out. And that feeling is something that I cannot describe and I cannot get enough of. What kind of feelings were you experiencing when you were doing that?
Absolutely. Like selling my belongings and getting rid of things and throwing it out and purging, it was like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders. And I traveled the world with a backpack and a suitcase. And so I learned how to live minimalistically. And I think in the United States, we're taught that the more stuff you have, the more successful you are. Like our success is based on our, do you have a big house? Do you have a fancy car? Things like that. But this was just a different kind of success. It was like, I learned that success to me is freedom and community and experiences. And it was just such a freeing feeling to get rid of my stuff. And I'm actually going through that feeling right now because I'm doing it again. And even though I have less stuff now, it's still such a freeing feeling to be able to get rid of even more stuff. I just love that feeling.
There is nothing like it. There is
There is.
absolutely nothing that compares to that feeling. I don't care what anybody says. If you haven't done it, you. It's so funny because you're right. Society, especially in the US, makes you connect yourself with materialistic objects. It's pounded into us always. And
Mhm.
when you get rid of that, it's like a weight being lifted.
People don't realize that the more stuff you have, the harder you have to work because you're paying off all these things. You're paying off your fancy car and your fancy house and all the stuff that goes inside of these things. And the less stuff you have, the less bills you have and the less work it will take for you to pay the things off. So I don't know. I just
Right.
really experienced a huge amount of freedom from selling my belongings.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, with obviously, you just spoke to someone caught. You spoke about how we define success, with material things, but on the road, you kind of define your success by the freedom and the connections and all that. But we do have to make money.
Oh, of course.
So running your business from the road, or you kind of started your journey in business the first time, and you kind of fleshed it out with your time here back in the States for a little bit. But as you go, how do you plan on make sure that you continue running that and building it and being successful with your community and your business?
So one of the things that I struggled with in Bali was that the Wi-Fi was not reliable and the time difference was enormous. It was like 15 hours. And so this time around, I'm sticking to this side of the world. So the time difference is not large, and also the plane rides for people to get there are short, and you just have to make sure that you have reliable Wi-Fi at the places that you stay. And I think that the rest will fall into place. You learn lessons along the way, of course.
You learn a lot. I remember when I set up to do my podcast when I was in Marbella, Spain. I was in Miami for like 3 weeks, and then I went to Marbella for a couple of weeks. And I set up all my podcasts, and I knew the outlets were different, obviously, but I didn't realize that the adapter was also not a transformer. So as I set up to do my first podcast, I plugged everything in. I watched all my lights go bzz,
Oh
and
no.
smoke. So all of a sudden, I was sitting there with no lighting equipment, and everything was fried. I had to run around town to find ring lights and soft lights and
Fun.
everything. So yeah, you learn a lot on the road, and the time difference is a real thing too. I remember myself doing podcasts at 2 o'clock in the morning when I was in Vietnam.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I love having these conversations. They amp me up. So I'm like 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm finishing up a podcast and I am juiced. Like I got to get to sleep in my house. But yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge. With your business, it's all 100% online, except when you organize the events in certain locations, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So that will be something that you can manage as long as you got good Wi-Fi.
Yes, exactly.
You know, because keeping that Wi-Fi thing in mind, I pretty much stayed in Airbnbs, a
Yeah.
month or 2 months or 3 weeks. And I always communicated very closely with the owner. I'd have them send me screenshots of the Wi-Fi speed. So I mitigated that a little bit. But I've also heard that Starlink,
I've
uh,
heard that too. I was looking into that a little bit, but I haven't got that far yet.
yeah, I was on a couple digital nomad sites, and there are a lot of people who, even when you're in really, really remote areas, like wilderness style, you can still get Wi-Fi that's good enough to support this kind of thing,
Right,
which
exactly.
I've got to check into it more, but that might be something because I do like going off grid, but I still want to be able to function.
Yeah.
So it's kind of necessary. But what is there any other tools or apps or things that you found very helpful while you were traveling?
I think that the Translate app is definitely helpful for when there's a language barrier. And I think for working, I really liked Canva. It just helped me to be creative and without needing all the knowledge of marketing and things like that. It just kind of built in for you. I enjoyed the Canva app.
Okay. With somebody who might be in a similar position to yours, what kind of input or advice would you have for them in terms of finances when traveling, making sure that they're good if they don't have, like you didn't have a stable online business when you left, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I took my savings. I had enough savings to get me by for traveling for a bit. So I wasn't putting myself into a situation where I wouldn't be able to function. So I think if you have an online business or you find a way to make money online, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Whether it's your own business or so many, especially after the pandemic, there's so many places where you can find remote work.
Yeah, exactly.
So it makes things a lot easier, I think. But so this is the big one. What kind of advice would you give somebody who is in a position where they really want to do this and they've been thinking about it and it's in their heart, it's in their soul, they want to, but they're just kind of hesitant to take that step for whatever reason?
I think stop thinking and just do it. Like you don't need a plan. I literally got on a plane to Spain with 3 days and booked in a hostel. So I think if you want to do it, the worst thing that can happen is you come back and you start over. So I think that everything always works out in life, and it works out the way that it's supposed to. So if you want to do something, do it, because you don't know when your time is going to be, and life is too short to wait. So take action and stop overthinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paralysis by analysis.
Mhm.
I talked to a woman recently who she had kind of wanted to do that, kind of wanted to do that, but then I can't remember, was it 2020 or 2021? She got breast cancer. So she had to deal with that. And she beat it. She's cancer free, but that was her wake up call. After that, she was like, screw this. We don't know when our time was. And everybody's on that delayed gratification, delayed happiness plan. Like, oh, I'll go travel, I'll do all that stuff when I'm retired. And oh, the retirement, and then this, and then that, and then next thing you know, you're really kind of too old to really enjoy it like you could have.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people at this age, we're dealing with health issues, we're dealing with our parents, aging, we're dealing with all sorts of things that you don't realize are going to come up. And so the sooner you do it, the better.
Yeah, things are going to come up, and I had a little bit of a wake up call myself because, like as you kind of alluded to, the time difference when you're in Southeast Asia is dramatic, 12, 13 hours, so it's almost directly opposite. My parents are getting older too, so that was on my mind. But then I got that call in the middle of
Mm-hmm.
the night,
Mm-hmm.
um, and my niece had been in a car accident,
Oh.
and she passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it was, that was like, wow, I am a long way away
Mm-hmm.
from home. Because I wanted to
Right.
be home instantly to be with my family, my sister, and that was, I got on a plane and went, but I had to get patched together flights and all that, and got home and, but that is something that when you're a long ways away from like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I've kind of struggled with because I want to get back on, but I still my parents are getting up there, and you just never know what's going to happen. So it's one of those things I kind of go back and forth with. I'm gonna go back to Southeast Asia next year for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I'm gonna be in Mexico here for a little while just because I got my girlfriend here. I set up a little studio, and I got to get shoulder surgery, so I'm gonna be planted. But as soon as my rehab is done, I'm gonna
Yeah.
be downsizing again. So yeah, it's interesting trying to carry all the podcast lighting and equipment in a suitcase with the other stuff, but I got the extra long suitcase and it's all
Perfect.
good. So anything that else that you would have to say to somebody who's wanting to make that move, especially if they're a empty nester mom or a single female?
I think the bigger the risk that you take, the more you grow as a person. If I had not made the decision that I did, I wouldn't have any of these stories. Like I traveled 17 countries and I have stories like you wouldn't believe. And before that, I didn't have anything. So I think that um, just take it one day at a time and take action in your life. Like identify what is making you unhappy and then do something about it, because life is too short to wait. And that's pretty much what I learned in a nutshell, is that you grow. When I look back 6 years ago today, I'm just like, wow, like I came so far from where I was 6 years ago, crying myself
Yeah.
to sleep every night. Like I think that you don't realize when you get stuck in this cycle of just going to work and coming home and not doing anything with your life and just feeling so unfulfilled. So
Mhm.
the bigger the risk you take, the more you will grow as a person.
I agree 1000%. It just go, like I did kind of the same thing you did in terms of just no real plan. Like, okay, I was in Miami for a little bit, then Spain, and then stopped off in Abu Dhabi for a little bit, and then I was in Thailand. But I didn't have like a itinerary, so I showed up in Bangkok. I was like, okay, this is cool. Hung out there for a little bit. I'm like, I've heard good things about Chiang Mai. It's the right time of year, so I went up to Chiang Mai, hung out there for a while. And I was like, well, I got to make a visa run anyway. So Ho Chi Minh City, that sounds like Vietnam sounds good. So as soon as I could get the visa thing, I was out. But I didn't have a plan, and I love that. I think that's especially good even for people who want that structure. Let go a
Yes.
little bit.
And
Live.
a lot of people need a plan, you know, like my daughter needs a plan, and I know that. So for some people, they might want to plan a little bit, but be aware that things may come up that are unplanned, and the plan may not go the way that you envisioned it in your head.
No, things will come up.
Yes, for sure.
100%. Cool. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation, and your story is inspiring, and I think it's going to be really insightful for a lot of people who may be in your situation looking for something in life.
Yes, for sure. Thank you for having me.